Hello and welcome to the New Lines podcast. I'm Faisal Al Yafai. And this is a podcast where we delve into some of the biggest ideas, events, and personalities in the Middle East and beyond. In a time of globally rising authoritarianism, increasing political polarization, of climate change, of many political challenges, it can feel as if the challenges that our societies face are too big to be faced alone. As if we are seeking to build something better, we will have to find a way to build it together. That is certainly the view of my guest today, the award-winning journalist and novelist Ece Temelkuran, whose latest book, Together, 10 Choices for a Better Now, declares that what we really need is a total transformation in our thinking in response to these urgent issues. We cannot confront these crises, she writes, without making a radical commitment to one another in the face of a world that encourages distrust above all else. Ece, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Faisal. Thank you for having me.
These issues seem political, but they're also deeply personal to you. You no longer live in Turkey, and you wrote your previous book, How to Lose a Country, after realizing that the same authoritarianism that had forced you to leave was rising all across the world. So I feel like in your case, the political really is very personal.
Well, I think that political is personal anyway, and being a woman helps because I am also taught by feminist politics, which says personal is political. But I do think that it's not only me. Everybody is living the consequences of rising fascism, authoritarianism, and the general confusion of post-truth world in their very personal lives, individual lives, and in their personal relationships. I know that Brexit has, damaged a lot of, friendships and marriages, etc. So we
Yeah.
are all living the consequences very personally.
Is that why you wanted to write a book that was more personal, that deals with the individual rather than, let's say, a political book?
Oh, well, I think it's a political book, but yes, it becomes more personal when I talk about morality and moral issues of 21st century, I guess. After How to Lose a Country and after it was published in several languages, I think like I went around the world probably 2 times and I talked to several audiences. And the question, which I think is quite a personal question, was so where is hope? I depressed all the audiences properly, and then they were asking for hope from me.
Right.
So I started thinking about that concept. Why do people want hope? And what would it change if I tell them there is hope? Or what would it change if I tell them there is no hope? And I started thinking that this is an inconsequential question, and people need something personally in their personal lives, in their personal politics, so to speak, something else. They need something else, and I thought that word might be faith, and I started the book from that concept, so to speak. So yeah, it sounds it sounds personal because I'm talking about such concepts like faith, radical love, friendship, dignity. So these are I don't know if they're personal, but they are certainly very close to the bone. So
Hmm.
for everyone, I think that's why maybe it feels personal. And I think I'm following the line of Hannah Arendt, Simone Weil, Albert Camus, who were not completely, distant from moral issues when it comes to politics. And these all these writers wrote about their personal, they jumped from their personal issues to politics, or they saw these lines, or connections between the personal and political. So
Very much
when
rooted in their personal experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, like Hannah Arendt wrote about forgiveness. I mean, like she wouldn't have if her biggest and first love uh, hadn't become a Nazi party member. So yeah, and Albert Camus, all the same. Simone Weil, all the same. I mean, like these people took it to the heart. And I think this is important, especially when we are living in a heartless uh, age. I'm like, this is a nice reference to Marx now, but it has been a heartless world, and it is it's becoming even more so. So people need something emotional as well. So what I'm trying to do in Together is actually building up a new politics of emotions, a new vocabulary for the progressives of the world, so they can enlarge the front against fascism, against climate crisis, and all the things that make the century unbearable. I think those words are calling everyone to togetherness, other compared to other words, like more technical political words.
In a way, it's quite a unique book because as you say, it's partly political manifesto. Some of it reads like a self-help book, but it's not either of those things. It's one of the metaphors you use to describe it in the book itself is a political and moral antibody. What did you mean by that? That was your
Oh,
term, not
I mean, like,
mine.
while I was writing the book, there was pandemic, so the entire discourse was transformed.
Right,
Yeah,
it was
so
on your
I think
mind. You
I'm,
couldn't help it. Yeah.
yeah, I was under the influence of this vaccine discourse, probably.
But what did you? I mean, do you think of the book as well? I guess you don't think of it as a vaccine. You think of it as an antibody.
Yeah, it's an antibody.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we're talking about politics as if we are not exhausted. I
Mm,
know this best from Turkey because you resist, you stand up, you shout, you resist again, you uprise. But all these things happen with people and in people as well. And I saw a nation becoming exhausted. So I also wanted to, yes, help. I mean, like, it's not self help because it's about two people minimum, because it's about togetherness. It's not, proposing some sort of individual salvage, but still, I think we have to think about what people emotionally need in order to rise up and to take some sort of political stance, to get into political action. It's not easy. I mean, because all this time, especially since 1980s, the dominant discourse was that politics is dirty and there are adults in the room. We don't have to think about anything because this is the best system that the humankind can come up with. And this is freedom. This is free market economy, is freedom per se. And several other, ridiculous mottos were imposed in us. Two generations grew up with this discourse. And now suddenly everybody has to be an activist. Why? Because the planet is going to hell. It's
mm,
apocalypse. And now we have to do something. So, how can you transform that ideal individual of neoliberalism into an activist or into a protester, a member of resistance? You have to, I think, we all have to speak about the matters that are close to heart as well. And also, we are living in an age, thanks to this post-truth thing, we're living in an age of hostility, anger, uh, and clash. Our new communication sphere is designed to create these emotions.
mm.
So togetherness is becoming harder and harder, and especially when we need it most.
There's an urgency to the book, I think. I mean, you're not writing something, as a blueprint for 10 years down the line. You're saying that we have to change our behavior in the immediate here and now.
Well, Faisal, sometimes I feel like a ambulance going around Europe warning people, or sometimes I feel like a Cassandra telling people, "Oh, you're going to die," or something. Especially, felt that after How to Lose a Country was published. Yes, there is an urgency. It's not my invention, or it's not my take on the current issues. It is so. I mean, like, what's happening in Glasgow now is the best example of that urgency. So yes, there is an urgency, but people always postpone these things to future. Better, for a better future, building a better future, a new future, blah blah blah. But it's actually now. What we have to do, we have to do it now. And it is not, it's not a guide, this book. Like, you can organize like this, you can act like this. I am not that practical in together. I am giving some sort of new vocabulary to build our political action upon. So yeah, it is, as you said in the beginning, it feels different than a proper political book, I guess.
You mentioned Cassandra, the Greek prophetess, which is something that you've definitely been compared with her in the past. Do you recognize some of the aspects of that you feel that, as she was not listened to in her time, perhaps you are not being listened to with the urgency that you feel is needed?
Well, yes, the other day I saw on social media memes about Boris Johnson, portraying him as a fascist leader, authoritarian leader, whatever. And I thought, my God, it was only 2 years ago that I told them that this will happen, and they were smirking at me. Because when you write about politics as a woman, you always end up with a white middle-aged established man on stage, and I was on the stage with that man for numerous times. And the first thing they do is like to refute you. They don't want to think together with you. They want to refute your ideas, or analysis, and so on. So I was trying to tell them that, okay, this is not about me. I'm not comparing the countries. I know your country is different, but what I see happening in your country is exactly the same what happened in my country. So maybe you should be more alert. That was the thing I was trying to tell, not only in Britain, but also in France, Germany, where people are more alert about these things, and United States. But there is this exceptionalism in the Western world. They are really too confident in their institutions, which is okay with me. But like this, and still, those things that I said that would happen is happening, especially in the UK. It is not giving me this Schadenfreude, so to speak. I'm not feeling like, oh, I told you so and you didn't believe. It's not like that. I truly believe in global solidarity when it comes to fascism, because I know, and we actually all know, that fascism cannot be beaten with the national resources only. Fascism is always beaten through global solidarity. So actually, I was trying to call people to that global solidarity.
You,
Uh,
you feel that sometimes you're not taken seriously because there's this sort of Western attitude of, well, that happens in Turkey, but of course it could never happen in the West. That Western exceptionalism that you talked about.
well, if you don't, if there were people who were not taking me seriously, it's not about me; it's about them, certainly. But no, I mean, like, people took it seriously, of course, in Australia, in other places, in England as well. It is just that, I guess, these things, Hannah Arendt says, drawing lessons from history is a myth. That is true. Drawing lessons from another country is another myth, I think. I mean, like, they don't, people not easily are convinced that this is a global phenomena.
Mm.
My argument was, it's not like, all the countries all of a sudden somehow going through the same thing, going through this danger of losing democracy, because this is happening because it was inherent in the system. Neoliberalism, the contract of neoliberalism, has cancelled out the fundamental contract of democracy, because we wiped the system, took out social justice from that equation, the equation of democracy, and the democracy has become the theatrics of itself. So therefore, people do not have any true connection to their democracies. That's why maybe they are not alert enough, especially in the Western world, to protect their democracies, especially after 2008 economic crises. The crisis that they feel like, okay, there's nothing for me in the system.
But
So
which is,
yeah.
I mean, people who are students of fascism will recognize that when start people in the society start to feel that way, that's a profoundly dangerous moment. But I wanted to
Absolutely.
ask you, yeah, but I wanted to ask you about the Cassandra analogy again, because what I was getting at was I wonder what this personal toll that is when you're traveling so much and talking to groups when they are listening to you, but to some degree they're at an angle to your perspective. They can't quite believe that it's true.
Yes, I think it's the human nature. People, want to wait until last moment. And this is how fascism actually become flourish in political
Mm,
space. But yeah, I am. English is not my mother tongue. I have curly hair. I'm coming from Turkey. So I am not and I'm not an academic. I'm not an established person in that sense. So it is not easy for them to sit down and take it seriously. And also, I'm like, the biggest factor is that I am talking, talking about things they do not want to hear. Uh,
that's part of the difficulty.
yeah.
Ironically, of course, you probably do look like the historic Cassandra, so I don't know why.
Unfortunately.
No. But I wanted to ask you then about the book. I mean, the origin of the book, because you talked about how there was a personal aspect to, the writings of Hannah Arendt, Albert Camus, and I wonder if you feel there was a personal aspect to you that brought you to that book.
Oh, absolutely. It is not a picnic to go around the world and talk to audiences about how the humanity is going towards hell, and politics is not politics will be a disaster very soon, and it's not easy to protect our democracies. uh, One kind of loses her faith in humankind. I started feeling like, I am losing my faith in everything. The entire action, political action or political study, somehow started to look meaningless to me. So, in order to heal this damage in myself, I think I started to think about a more personal perspective. Uh,
And
we
you're
are
talking
living.
about, yeah.
Excuse me?
No, I was saying you were talking about your book tour on how to lose a country. And it was during that period of time that you felt that you started to lose faith.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
mm.
And I noticed that I cannot really answer the question of hope, which is
Yeah.
an important thing. I mean, like, because I can do a lot of tricks in a public talk to evade a question or to look really smart while not answering. But
Mm.
actually, deep inside, I knew that I couldn't answer the question of hope. So that is why I started thinking about hope, faith, and then the other words followed when I was writing together.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
you say. I mean, it's in there in the first chapter, which is called "Choose Faith Over Hope," that you don't like the word hope. You've been quite remarkably consistent about that. I wonder what it is about hope that you find so objectionable, and why you still have faith even though you don't have hope.
Um, in Turkey, especially after 2010, let's say, when things seriously started going down the hill, uh, while I was giving, while I was still able to give speeches in Turkey, in public speeches, uh, the people asking me the same question. So, where is hope, Ece Hanım? Uh, and then I thought this is an emotional crutch, and they are expecting someone to create hope for them, so to speak. So that is why I became a little bit disturbed by the question, and then it carried on after How to Lose a Country in several other countries. It's the same question, same in asked in the same manner. uh, and I thought, the answer is quite obvious, like organize and act. But obviously, there's another obstacle there before that organization and organizing and acting: the motivation. Why? The reason to act. I think people are asking for a reason rather than a hope. So that is why it annoyed me, because also it put a unimaginable burden on my shoulders. Like, now I have to create hope in a truly dark situation. So yeah, that is why I think.
I wondered about that when I was reading the book, because I actually feel like there is, how sometimes people say that they have to do this emotional labor as well. And I
Mhm.
wondered if, with your role as a public intellectual, some of what you are doing is merely telling people what your analysis of the world is. That's one aspect of it. But it sounds like what you're saying is that you also felt you then had to do the emotional labor of bringing them back up, bringing them hope, making them feel at the end of what might be a difficult conversation that it's okay, there are still ways to make this work.
Yes. This is a great question, and I am truly thinking now. That is why I went a little bit silent. Yeah, um, that is true. But I can do it. I can make people. Um, I can make people find a new reason to act and to be. I can, elate them in that sense. So why wouldn't I do it?
So
Yes,
why
it's
wouldn't you do
yes.
it?
I do it actually. It's just the word hope that gets me a little bit weird. But otherwise, in every public speech, I think people leave the room feeling that yes, we can do it. Because I want to restore the faith in humankind, and it is an emotional labor, both on my side and on their side. But I sharing this labor is my point. It's just don't put all the labor on me. We can do it together, and it will be a joyous thing to share this burden. It won't be a burden anymore, to create the reason to restore the faith in politics and so on. Because I know in deep down that faith is necessary, faith in humankind, faith in politics, because fascism is the total loss of faith in humankind and in politics. And this is a dangerous that is a dangerous destination where people are going. I mean, like, they in every country, if there is a right-wing populist leader emerging, that there is loss of faith in politics. There is loss of faith in people. So I know that that emotional labor is necessary for the political action to start off. So that is why we need it. And
But it does
since I can
feel
do it,
sometimes,
sorry.
apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ece, but it does feel like, as as you did Stephen Sacco, it does feel, it does feel like that there's an aspect that you feel upset about with that emotional labor, that maybe you feel as if audiences are not responding swiftly enough to the message that you believe you're sending them.
No, not really. Not really. What I'm looking for, friendship as a methodology. So friendship is a just place. Actually, friendship is the place where absolute justice happens. So that justice requires sharing the emotional labor, political labor as well. So this is what I'm asking from people. I started this new project, Letters from Now, and this is an experiment to create that kind of friendship uh, among the members of this project, so that we can define a new way of relating to each other when we are talking and thinking about politics. So this is what I'm looking for, and that absolute justice. I know absolute justice is impossible, but I mean, like, our job is to incline towards that. So that ideal. So in human relations, reader and writer relation is not exempt from this.
Mm.
We have to be searching for that kind of friendship, that where absolute justice is searched for, at least.
I want to move on to talk about Turkey. And really, in a way, we'll be talking about your book prior to this one, How to Lose a Country. You've talked about the long smoking without fire, as you put it in the book, that leads to dictatorship and tyranny. Where do you feel that Turkey is now along that pathway? The fire has already begun, definitely, in your opinion.
Turkey is a very interesting country. Well, every country is interesting, obviously, but we take pride in being the strangest country on the planet, which is not true, but we kind of like to think that. Uh, but partly it is true because somehow when you lose all your hope, something happens and everything changes in 5 minutes. This is an expression in Turkish. Uh, Gezi uprising in 2013 happened just like that. We had no hope. We had nothing to look forward to, and then suddenly something huge, massive happened, and it
Mm.
was the most joyful thing I've ever seen in my life. Although there were horrible casualties, and people were getting crippled and so on, but still there was this elating joy in those days of uprising. So I don't think such a thing will reoccur, but this time I am assuming, not assuming, but I am seeing this happening actually, and I think it will carry on happening. The new politics, the new opposition will rise from the local politics, because the big cities are now run by opposition party mayors, and they are producing incredible amount of creative politics.
So
Uh,
it sounds as if you feel somewhat
Hopeful.
optimistic. Yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, like these binary, not what binary, like dichotomies, like hopeless, hopeful, optimist,
I was trying
pessimist, and so on.
to find a synonym for hopeful.
I
I
know.
couldn't
I
use that
heard your
word.
thinking.
Yeah, exactly. What do you want from me? You wrote a whole book about not being hopeful. What do you, yeah.
No, I'm seeing this happening. This is a reality, so it's not about my feelings. Well, I do think that history does not care about what we feel at home, like whether we are optimist or pessimist. It cares about what we do outside our homes together. So, what I see happening right now is these mayors are leading the way towards a new kind of opposition, which is far more colorful than the established conventional opposition party which they are coming from, actually. So this is going to be a new wave, I suppose, and I know I this like one can feel the feelings of her country. I think I know that people are biting their everything, and
Their
they are
nails. Yes.
trying to be patient until 2023, because it's not easy to be patient. Everything is really hellish in Turkey at the moment.
You mean that by 2023 there might be a possibility of removing Erdogan? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, there is the elections. Hopefully there will be elections. Hopefully there will be no blood spilled before those elections. And if there will be an election, like a proper election, obviously they are going. I mean, like, this regime is going, and we are going back to a parliamentarian system, which I am personally looking forward to.
But is it? I mean, don't you think that's somewhat optimistic? 2023 is, I mean, election could conceivably be 18 months away. Is
Mhm.
18 months sufficient? Erdogan is still popular in the country. He's still the dominant politician of the era.
Faisal, he's not popular. His, surveys and opinion polls show that he's below 40, even in 30s. His parties as well. So this is one thing. Second thing, I wouldn't really depend on that support either, because that support, like Erdogan created that support like any other authoritarian leader in Europe, or in any other part of the world, by creating web of finance, political money. It's not only few families who's sharing the riches of Turkey, but that money goes through the capillary systems of a web that feeds the small man, the ordinary man, who become the diehard supporter of the party. uh, so that web is collapsing now because there is no money left. I am depending on that as well, actually.
And then your observations of Turkey were what eventually led to this book, How to Lose a Country. But it wasn't just Turkey. You started to feel that you'd seen those warning signs elsewhere. In the book, you lay out 7 steps that authoritarian movements go through to take power, which could take a country from democracy to dictatorship. And you said in the book that you felt that what was happening in Turkey, the same strategies were then being used elsewhere.
Mhm.
Of those 7 steps that you outlined, I won't go through all of them, but of the 7 steps, where do you think we are now in what you might call the democratic West, like the US, Britain, and France? At what stage?
No, I mean, like, every country is in a different, and these steps are not necessarily chronological.
Mm.
But I think what's happening right now in London is quite interesting because it applies to the 4th step, I guess, dismantling the judiciary system and so on, and also the corruption, the party becoming very much, involved with money, political money, and so on. So yes, in every country it is different, and the center, both in France, in Germany, and in United States, are trying to hold on to power. But we all know, even themselves know, that center cannot hold unless it is supported by the progressives of that country. uh, Obama said something very interesting the other day about the center and center not holding progressive politics and so on. And I thought, oh, this guy is reading very good. I'm like, because he already knows that Biden is there thanks to the progressives of
Mm.
American society. It's not only it wasn't only Democratic Party that created that political wave that sent Trump away. So I think that should be the way for the center to renew. That will be the way for the center to renew itself, to get the support of the progressives,
Mm.
left, like literally left politics. I think this is going to be interesting. Coming 10 years will be really interesting in Europe.
The step that I thought was very intriguing was number 3. It's the third step is remove the shame. Immorality is
Mm.
hot, within quotes, in the post-truth world. And that's something I think that is very much applicable to modern America, because there is a sense that the that being an outsider is something that is politically exciting, not merely politically palatable in the way that perhaps it wasn't in the past, but that actually refusing the vaccine mandates, believing that there was a theft of the election, these things are somehow, as you say, hot. They're exciting.
Hmm. Well, to be honest, that is my favorite chapter. I'm personally proud that I've written that chapter, but it wasn't easy because shame um, is an interesting word. Because it sounds differently in my part of the world. It sounds differently in Christian world, let's say. And
Yeah.
when you
Tell me the
say,
differences. Yeah.
it is not easy, but it has a history, not only about Christianity but also near history about 1980s loss of shame, and shame becoming something to get rid of. But shame in my part of the world is something else. It is something that stops you doing from inhumane things, the moral mistakes and so on. And those moral mistakes are not necessarily related to religion. It's about being a good person as well. Anyway, so shame is a very interesting concept, and it was really hard to write this concept in English. Uh, anyway, so this shame concept, and shame in politics and loss of shame in politics, is a huge topic. And because we are going back to the beginning of this conversation, it affects our personal lives immensely.
Mm.
When Donald Trump, or Boris Johnson. When Donald Trump, proudly becoming the pussy grabber, all right? When Boris Johnson's words about the dying people leaked,
Yeah.
and when they weren't really embarrassed of this,
Yeah.
that trickles down. That new moral normal trickles down, and
That's
then
what I
you.
mean, that you're
Mhm.
not even talking about the use of language that trickles down. You mean that it's the moral universe that when Boris talks about leaving the bodies to pile high, that
Mhm.
idea of the moral universe he's conceiving of, that trickles down.
Yeah, it becomes sayable, it becomes thinkable, it becomes doable. And this is very dangerous because then on the streets, you will have millions and millions of Boris Johnsons and Trumps. And then it is that point that it becomes really difficult for a country, because then, even if you get rid of Boris Johnson or Trump, you cannot get rid of these millions. So, what are you going to do with these guys? So yeah, that shame in politics, loss of shame in politics is particularly important. I think that's a no return line.
I wanted to end maybe by talking a little bit more personally about you and your work. One of the striking things about the book Together is its informality, the sort of focus on relationships and ways of thinking. And in some ways, even though you seem like a critic of the neoliberal project, you're actually quite individualistic in how you write the book. You address people as individuals rather than as part of wider political groups. And is that because you feel that the political progress requires deep political change, a deep personal change?
I don't think it's an individualistic book, because as all the other new progressives, I am looking for a political action that the individual does not have to melt into. I'm looking for a crowd that everybody has its own, are free to carry, their own color. So I don't think it is individualistic, but yes, it takes the individual in its center together.
Mm.
That is two different things, I guess. And yes, this society, all societies are made of individuals, and what we feel individually actually are not really completely different from each other. I think this, we are all different thing is overrated.
Mm.
We are all exhausted. We are all confused. We are living in fear. We're absolutely anxious. Everybody on this planet right now has lost a bit of its her and his mental health. It is, individual is not completely unique in that sense, especially when it comes to politics.
I wonder if you feel that you have been personally changed by your politics.
Yes, I did.
In what way?
I did. Not in terms of politics. I wouldn't say that, but uh, while writing Together, I had to go back to the roots of my political position. So why was I thinking that? Why was I, a progressive? Why was I on the left of politics and so on? So actually, I wanted to go to the moral heart of my political choices, and I wanted to tell about this, the core values, to people, so that they can sort of double check, or they can make their political choices more sturdy and more active. So yeah, it changed me, and I think I became a better person, yes, while writing Together.
Do you feel that politics has taken rather a lot from your life?
Well, when I had to leave Turkey, it was 2016. I started journalism when I was 18 in 1993. So that makes like 26 years, I think. Uh, so politics, my political choices have cost me a lot. I mean, like, it took away the life that I built for in 26 years, and all of a sudden I had to start from scratch. And this language right now I'm speaking, is I had to relearn it, so to speak, in the last 4 years in order to
Mm.
write these books. So it was a lot of work, and this was all because of my political choices. But then it's also important when you are, when you're paying a lot for your political choices in term, emotionally and financially, in every way possible. It is good that you remember why you chose this in the first place. It heals the wounds, actually.
You mentioned earlier about leaving Turkey. I've noticed that when people ask you, you seem very opposed to the word exile. People have
Oh
described
yeah,
you as that.
yeah,
Yeah, and
no,
you
yeah.
don't like that term. I wondered why.
It's a very heavy word, and once you wear it on, you cannot take it off. That is absolutely eternal. Like, even if you go back to your Turkey, you're an exile. And it's also, Faisal, I think I'm too proud, because I feel like the Western world, especially, they love this image of a woman, running away from the barbarians, throwing herself to the arms of civilization, exile, and so on. I cannot, keep that role. I'm like, even if I wanted to play that role, it wouldn't suit me. I would laugh. So, and it is a little bit of a reaction to that expectation. I think, no, I'm not an
Mm.
exile. This is a long journey. Life is a long journey, and this is a part of it. Everybody's living difficult lives. I am not living the most difficult life, and so on. So this is how I see it. And I love Brodsky's perspective, Russian poet Brodsky's perspective on this. um, he talks about exile and refugee. He doesn't really necessarily say this, but he inspired me to say this. The word exile is creates this aristocratic, privilege, so to speak. I am different than the Syrian who had to cross Mediterranean and who starts from life truly from scratch. And I don't like that aristocratic difference between me and the Syrian or the Iraqi, I think.
Do you feel that despite, as you said, having to leave the country and relearn a different language, do you still have faith, not hope, but faith in political but faith in political progress? And if so,
Absolutely.
from where?
Absolutely. I believe in people. While talking about faith, I had to come up with a proper definition of human, so that it is strong enough to carry our disappointments when we meet the worst of our kind, and it had to be solid enough to carry our higher expectations from humankind. So I came up with this definition, which is, I think, goes for everybody, even for the worst of us. I think humankind is hardwired to survive, and to survive by creating beauty. We are inclined towards beauty by nature. That is why I believe in humankind. And I choose to believe in humankind, by the way. This is a conviction. This is not a fact. This is a choice. And as any other faith, it's a tiny bit blind. And I like that blindness. I don't want my faith to be refuted. And I'm refusing my faith to be refuted, because I have to believe in humankind in order to keep going, in order to speak, in order to write, in order to be. So this is a choice. This is a political and moral stance.
Ece Temelkuran, thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisal.
You can sign up for Ece's Letters from Now project by going to lettersfromnow.com, all one word, and follow her on Twitter at @temelkuran. This week's podcast was produced by Joshua Martin and hosted by me, Faisal Al Yafai. You can subscribe to the New Lines podcast on your favorite podcast app. And of course, you can find more of the best stories from the Middle East and beyond on our website, newlinesmag.com. Thank you for joining us.